All right, Shalom, Shalom. It's Brother Yotazadak, hero of Israel. I'd like to start off by giving honor and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kakwadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Today we're going to go into 2nd Esdras, chapter 11. Going to break down the whole chapter. Lord willing through the Spirit. Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kakwadash. You ratified? Right? So let's get right into it. 2nd Esdras chapter 11 and verse 1, right? So I'm going to make this as short and sweet as possible, right? To make it very comprehensive, right? Because that's the whole point, right? Yeah, we can go deep, we can bring out history, but I want you to get the point of the various the heads and the wings of this great eagle, right? Which is written throughout chapter 11 and chapter 12, right? So let's get right into it. Second Esdras, chapter 11 and verse 1. And it reads, Then I saw a dream, and behold, there came up from the sea an eagle which had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads, right? You have the 12 feathered wings, right? The eagle in general represents Esau's rulership, right? You have the 12 feathers, which are the right side of the eagle, right? Which represents 12 Roman Caesars, right? 3 heads, right? Which represents the EU, right? One of them represents Russia. Another represents America, Babylon the Great, which is Rome revitalized, right? Now, so let's see, I believe that was in chapter 12, right? Because the 3 heads are to accomplish the wickedness of Esau upon the earth, right? The 12 Roman Caesars represents Esau, right, establishing his reign, started with the ancient Roman Empire, right? So chapter 12, right, let's get that real quick. So let's see. Looking for the part where it says, no, that's not it. Slack it, here it is. 2nd Esdras chapter 12 and verse, we'll start at 22, right? 2nd Esdras 12 and 22. And wherein thou sawest 3 heads resting, this is the interpretation. In his last days shall the Most High raise up 3 kingdoms, and renew many things therein. They shall have the dominion of the earth. Right? Verse 24, of those that dwell therein, which much oppression above all those that were before them. Therefore they are called the heads of the eagle. These are they that shall accomplish his wickedness, and that shall finish his last end. right? Because you have, right, EU, right, which is why it says, right, verse 23, these three heads of three kingdoms, right, to renew many things therein. Why? Because one of the heads was American Babylon the Great, which is Rome revitalized. The EU, right, which represents divided Europe, right, which ultimately destroyed one of the heads, right? Russia being part of the head, not because it's part of, they're joined together, right, but because Russia, right, is part of that wickedness, Esau's wickedness, right? Because you have what? The old Soviet Union, right? Which this was Esau fighting against Esau, right? Which is why it says in verse 11, right? You have, let's see. Second Esdras chapter 11. Let's see if we can get that real quick. Second Esdras 11 and 33. And after this I beheld, and lo, the head that was in the midst suddenly appeared no more, like as the wings. But there remained the two heads, which are also in like sort ruled upon the earth over those that dwelt therein. Right? Because you have, right, the two heads that remain was the EU and the America Babylon the Great, right? Russia not being part of that conglomerate, right? Because that's prophecy, right? You can read about that in Ezekiel chapter 38. Get that real quick. It's a lot here. Ezekiel 38 and 1. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against them. Right? And say, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, and the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Right? Because that word, right, the name Russia comes from the Hebrew Ra'ash, right? And this is in Magog, right, which is right. If you look at a biblical map, it's talking about the land of Russia, right? Meshech, Tubal, these are two Hebrew words as well. Mashak, meaning to draw out. Tubal, meaning to mingle, right? The root being below, right? Because this is the type of country Russia is, right? To mingle people, right? So it says, verse 4, Ezekiel 38 and 4, and I will turn thee back, and put hooks in thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth in all thine armies, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Right? The Lord turned Russia back in what? The Cold War. Right? But now things are heating back up. Right? You have the BRICS AI nations, right? You can have Russia, China, Iran, all these a great company, right? And you can look this up. I got a breakdown for Ezekiel chapter 38, right? You can check it out. But the point is, even right now, right? Ezekiel chapter 38 is being fulfilled, right? Because Russia is saying, right, they're having that, how do you say it? That evil thought, right? So let's get that. Salakia. Go to Twitter. Bring up this point, right? So the prophecies are coming to pass, right? War is being prepared, right? I was going to bring this up for in the news, but this pertains onto the breakdown. Salakia. That's not what I was looking for. Right, so you have says Russian state TV shows map dividing U.S. up among other countries, right, which is propaganda that Russia is pushing, right, but this is that evil thought that they're having, right, pursuant to Ezekiel chapter 38 and verse 10. For thus saith the Lord God, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, which is America, Babylon the Great, right? You have borders dividing particular states, but they're unwalled. They're right, they're state to state to state, right? You have these highways connecting them, right? Which is the scriptures speak about what the line of confusion, right? Which represents the highways of America, Babylon the Great. It says, I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and have neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thy hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations which have gotten thee cattle and goods that dwelt in the midst of the land. Right, so this is that evil thought that Gog and Magog is having, right, to divide, right, Esau, Edom, his America, Babylon the Great, right, which is why these three heads, there's three heads to the eagle, right, because ultimately one will not be, they all push the wickedness of Esau, they're all going to push, right, prophecy, right, by fulfilling what they have to fulfill, right, so just because, right, they're part of that same head, it doesn't mean they are working together, right? Even though the NATO and America, Babylon the Great is working together, which is part of the two of those three heads, right? But ultimately, the EU is going to turn on America, Babylon the Great, right? Which is why it says, 2nd Esdras chapter 12. And 2nd Esdras chapter 11, Salakia. And we'll go to right, so it says, and when they so thought, behold, there awaked one of the heads that were at rest, namely, it that was in the midst, for that was greater than the two other heads, right, which is America, Babylon the Great, right, because the epitome of Esau's kingdom is, right, the city of confusion, right, built off the blood of the so-called black, Hispanic, Native Americans, right, which are the Israelites, right? So it is currently greater than two other heads, right? Verse 30, and then I saw the two other heads were joined with it. Right? In essence, this is talking about Esau reigning during this time. Right? Behold, the head was turned with them that were with it, and did eat up the two feathers under the wing that would have reigned. Right? This is talking about, right, the two feathers that were left, which are the two contrary feathers, right, which ultimately represents, right, what is it, the Eastern Roman Empire, or the Holy Roman Empire, right, which is, right, when Esau was losing power, right, and Jake was coming into power, going into the Middle Ages, right, because ultimately, right, Jake ruled from what, from 500 to the 1500s, right, AD, right, so Esau was still in power, but he was losing his power. Jake got into power, right, but then Esau came back, right, in the Renaissance, right, which brought back that's the spirit of that old beast, right, which was wounded with a deadly wound, which is the ancient Roman Empire, right, and that also goes into, right, which is the last two feathers, right, which is after the Dark Ages, right. You have one of them being Napoleon, right, which he established the first French Empire, right, which was established in 1804, right, and then you have England, right. So these were the last two feathers, which is really part of the four contrary feathers, which is, right, the Eastern Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, when Esau was losing power, right. So that makes sense, right? These the France, England, right? That's talking about France, England in particular, right? Because that's part of that that head, which is America, Babylon, Great, which was greater than the two heads, right? Because Esau rose up greater than the EU, which is the European Union, right? Russia, which was they had been turned back, right? They were defeated in the war, right? But specifically, right, those are the two feathers, right, that would have reigned, right, because that's what Napoleon tried to do, right, to subdue the whole known world, right, England, right, but Esau was divided against Esau, right, so they fell, right, and they gained independence from England, right, they fought the Civil War, right. And it says, 2 Esdras 11:31, and behold, the head was turned with them that were with it, and did eat up the two feathers under the wing that would have reigned, right? But this head put the whole earth in fear, and bare rule in it over all those that dwelt upon the earth with much oppression. Had the governance of the world more than all the wings that had been, right? And it says, and after this I beheld, and lo, the head that was in the midst suddenly appeared no more, like as the wings, but there remained two heads, which also in like sort ruled upon the earth, and over those that dwelt therein. Right? Because, right, the head that was in the midst suddenly appeared no more. That's Russia kind of falling back into obscurity, right? Then coming back, right, until the time of the end. 2 Esdras chapter 11, or Salakia chapter 12, and verse 8. 2 Esdras 12 and 22, wherein thou sawest three heads resting. This is the interpretation, right? So they weren't necessarily ruling in particular times. This goes back and forth into time, right? Which is why it says they rested, right? They weren't done away with. They didn't, right? It says they disappeared, right? Because they fell back into obscurity. In his last days shall the Most High raise up three kingdoms, which are the three heads, three kingdoms, right? They shall have dominion of the earth. 2 Esdras chapter 12 and 24. And of those that dwell therein with much oppression, above all those that were before them, therefore they are called the heads of the eagle. For these are they that shall accomplish his wickedness, and that shall finish his last end. And when thou sawest that the great head appeared no more, signified that one of them shall die upon his bed, yet with pain, right? Which is America, Babylon the Great, right? Which is why it says here, 2 Esdras 11 and 33, and after this I beheld, and lo, the head that was in the midst suddenly appeared no more, like as the wings, right? Which means Russia fell back into obscurity. Verse 34, but there remained two heads, which also in like sort ruled upon the earth, and over those that dwelt therein, right? NATO and EU. And I beheld, and lo, the head upon the right side devoured it that was upon the left, right? Because ultimately the EU is going to come up against America, Babylon the Great, right? Which represents Esau being divided, right? And Russia coming back, right? So that third head is slowly reappearing, right? Making various partnerships, various deals, right? Which is why it says 2 Esdras chapter 12, Second Esdras 12 and 2, and I beheld the head that remained, and of the four wings appeared no more. And the two went to it, and set themselves up to reign, and their kingdom was small and full of uproar. Right? Because that's talking about after America, Babylon the Great gets destroyed. Then you have the EU, right? Which is, right, countries like, right, France, England, right? Right, whatever's left in Europe, which is divided Europe, right, which is the 10 toes, which is the 10 crowns, right? But that's for another lesson, right? So it says the four wings appeared no more, the two went into it, and set themselves up to reign, and their kingdom was small and full of uproar. Talking about the four wings, right, which is spoken of in the previous chapter, right, which is what you have, which here they're called feathers, right, which you have two of those feathers representing the from 96 to 192 AD, from started with Nerva, which is called also the Antoine dynasty. Then you have the other two, which is representing the fall of the Western Roman Empire, right, which is from 455 to 476 AD, right, continued with Romulus Augustus, right, and the last four, which is the 8 contrary feathers, are called wings, right, which is the Eastern Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, right, which is going from Esau's rulership to the Dark Ages, right? But part of those four, right, last contrary feathers, it also represents Esau coming back into power, right? You got Napoleon, you got, which is the French and England, which set up America Babylon the Great to have its reign, right? Which is why it says, 2nd Esdras 12:2, and behold, the head that remained, and the four wings appeared no more, right? Which is the old Roman Empire, right? And which is 8 contrary feathers, because you have the 4, right? Esau's old rulership. Then you have, right, the other 4, which is which represents the Holy Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, Slovakia, the Holy Roman Empire, the Eastern Empire. But you have also France and England as part of those 4, which makes it 2 of those wings, right? So it says the 4 wings appeared no more, and the 2 went into it and set themselves up to reign, and their kingdom was small and full of uproar, right? Because the 4 wings, right, is part of those last 4 contrary feathers. The reason why they're wings is because they attempted to fly on their own, right? But they didn't appear no more because Esau came back into power. So those 2, right, went into it, meaning they were absorbed by America Babylon the Great, right, or by the European Union, Slovakia, because that's the head that's remaining. This is after America Babylon the Great gets destroyed. So during this time you have, like it says, right, in the previous chapter, chapter 11, that one of the heads disappeared, right, and then the EU devoured America Babylon the Great. This is Esau's last stand ultimately, right, because that is part of that European Union, right? Because they got tired of America Babylon the Great. So they're small, their kingdom being small and full of uproar, right? Verse 3, 2nd Esdras 12:3, and I saw, and behold, they appeared no more, and the whole body of the eagle was burnt, so that the earth was in great fear. Then I awaked out of the trouble and trance of my mind from great fear, and said unto my spirit, right? So essentially that's what it's talking about, right? The head in the mist suddenly appear no more, right? Like as the wings, right? Which are called feathers, right? And in the beginning of this chapter, right? Which is because 2nd Esdras 11:1, they call them 12 feathered wings. So don't let that throw you off, right? That just represents, like it says in verse 2, she spread her wings all over the earth, which is those feathers, which makes up that wing, right? But when it calls them just wings by themselves, it represents them being stood up individually, right, for a purpose, right? So it says, 2nd Esdras 11 and verse 32, but this head put the whole earth in fear, and bare rule in it over all that dwelt upon the earth with much oppression, and had the governance of the world more than all the wings that had been. Right? Verse 36. Actually, that's it for that. Right? So verse 35 says, and I beheld, and lo, the head upon the right side devoured it that was upon the left side. Right? Meaning the EU, right, which you read that in the book of Revelation, right, shall burn her up with great fire. Let's get that real quick. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 17 and verse 16. The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Right? Which is NATO and the EU. Right? So very, very comprehensive, right? When you put it in simplest terms, right? So now let's go back to 2nd Esdras 11. Let's just start at 1. Then I saw a dream, behold, there came up from the sea an eagle, which had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads, right? Which represents the right side of the eagle, right? Which are the 12 Roman Caesars, right? Again, you have what? Let's go through them. You have Julius Caesar, which reigned in 60 BC. You have Augustus, 27 BC. Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, which is the 5th. Nero being the 6th. The 7th being Galba. The 8th being Otho. Vitellius being the 9th. Vespasian the 10th. Titus the 11th. And Domitian the 12th, right? So those are the 12 feather wings, right? The 3 heads. We explained the 3 heads. And I saw, and behold, she spread her wings over the earth. Right, so now here they're called wings, right? Over all the earth, and all the winds of the air blew on her and were gathered together, right? Because, right, when the book of Daniel represents, right? Let's get that real quick. We don't have to get that, actually. Let's just get it. All right, this is Daniel. This is the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 6. Daniel 7:6. And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. Right? Which is, represents the Greeks, which came into power in 300 BC. Right? The 4 wings, the 4 heads. Right? The 4 heads is Lysimachus, which ruled in thrice in Asia Minor. Cassander from Macedonia and Greece. Ptolemy ruled in Egypt, Palestine, Sicilia. Petrus, Cyprus. Seleucus dynasty, which is the remainder of Asia, which is called the Seleucid Empire. Right? Well, those are the 4 heads. The 4 wings represents it, what Hellenizing the known world. Right? 4 wings, 4 corners of the earth. Right? But in this case, this is talking about, right, the coming of that power, that 4th beast, which is Rome and America Babylon the Great, which is a terrible beast described in verse 7, 10 horns and 1 little horn, right? But you can look up that breakdown. I have that on my channel, right? So the eagle spread her wings over all the earth, right? Which was the rise of Rome, right? Verse 3, and I beheld, and out of her feathers there grew other contrary feathers, and they became little feathers and small. Why were they called contrary feathers? Right? Because, right, you have, right, on the right side, you have the 12 feathered wings, right, which was a wing with 12 feathers on it, which is the 12 Roman Caesars. The eagle had 3 heads, right? But then you had 8 contrary feathers, right? And they became little feathers and small, right? So in essence, this is what it looked like. Give you a little visual, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right? These are the 12 Roman Caesars, right? The eagle had 3 heads, right? This represents the 12 Roman Caesars, the rise of Rome. You have the U.S., EU, Russia. They weren't necessarily together, right? Russia was not in conglomerate with the U.S. or the EU, but they all forwarded that wickedness, like I explained earlier. Then you have the 8 contrary feathers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? Which is part of that eagle, which is another wing of that eagle. Right? Now I might have to go back to that. So let's just read out. I'll just read it out of my Bible. Right? So they grew other contrary feathers, right? And they became little feathers and small. Why were they contrary feathers, right? Because you have 2 of the little feathers was from 96 to 192 AD, Nerva, the Antoine dynasty, right? The other 2, which represents the fall of the West Roman Empire, which is from 455 to 476 AD, Romulus Augustus. You can look it up on Wikipedia. Look up the various Caesars. Right, Caesar is just another word for king. Right. 455 to 476 AD, Romulus Augustus. Why? Because Esau was losing prominence. Right. You had Jake coming into these positions of power. Right. Even, I believe, before that, right? Because you had, let's go to Revelation chapter 20. Because you had Constantine the Great, you had Septimus Severus, right? And these other Jakes that came into power during that time. Right, so Esau was losing the grip on his own power structure, right? Which I believe you had what was called the 4 good Caesars, which were Jakes, right? And they made Rome better, but Rome was still under Esau's hand, right? Then you have the other 4. So those are 4 contrary feathers. Then you have the other remaining 4 contrary feathers. Reason why they're contrary is because there was division, there was tumults. Right? Right before Rome fell. Right? But Jake kept Rome going, right? And eventually eventually Jake took over, right? Which is in the Dark Ages, right? Which is the Eastern Roman Empire. It's also known as the Holy Roman Empire, right? Which the Moors ruled during that time, that was Jake, right? But part of those, so those are the 4 remaining contrary feathers, right? So you have 2 and 2. I just mentioned the 2 and 2, and then the 4, right? 2 little feathers represents from 96 to 192 AD, Nerva Antoine dynasty. You have the last empire, the fall of the Western Roman Empire, 455 to 476 AD, which is Romulus Augustus. And then the last 4 is the Holy Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, right, when Jake was coming into power. But this also, part of those 4, 2 of those feathers here represents Napoleon, right, which he established the first French Empire in 1804, and England, which ultimately followed, right? So France, England, right, as part of those, that's part of those 4. The reason why they're contrary, because this is during the Middle Ages, right? This was during, right, when Esau came into power. So these are all contrary, because certain parts of Rome had to fall, right? So that's why they're called contrary feathers, right? So it says, Verse 4, but her heads were at rest. The head in the midst was greater than the other, yet rested it with the residue. Right? So her heads were at rest, meaning Rome wasn't fully established at that time. Right? But it was, right? Because of the Roman Caesars. Right? So the head in the midst was greater than the other, which is America, Babylon the Great, but it's also Rome, which is America, right? Then you have you have EU, and then you have Russia, which didn't come until later, right? Which is why they rested. It was greater than the others, right? Because it was that fierce, the fourth beast, which reigned, which was fierce during that time. Teeth were as iron, because that was the main. That's how Esau came into power. That's how Rome came into power, through its weaponry, right? So yet it rested with the residue. Why? Because Rome fell, and then Rome came back as America, Babylon the Great, right? 2 Esdras 11:5. Moreover, I beheld, and lo, the eagle flew with her feathers, and reigned upon the earth, and over them that dwelt therein. Right? Verse 6. And I saw that all things under heaven were subject unto her, and no man spake against her, no, not one creature upon the earth. Right? And not to confuse you, but right, one of those heads is the Greeks as well, right? Because they kind of were pushing towards that same mindset. They were pushing that same mindset, right? But really, it's the U.S., it's EU, and Russia, the latter-day kingdoms, which the U.S. is America, Babylon the Great, is Rome. They're the Greeks because they're Edomites. They're all Edomites, but the Greeks, right? The Romans followed after the Greeks, right? Which is why it says in the book of Maccabees, right, that inconsistencies were multiplied upon the earth, right? Because that was that third beast, right? We don't have to get that, but you get the point. Verse 7, and I beheld, and lo, the eagle rose upon her talons, and spake unto her feathers, saying, watch not all at once, sleep every one in his own place, and watch by course. Right? But let the heads be preserved for the last. Right? So they all ruled according to their course. Right? The Roman Caesars. Right? The two little feathers, which is Nerva, the Antoine dynasty. The other two, which is Romulus Augustus, the fall of the Western Roman Empire. And the other four, which completes the 8 contrary feathers, the Eastern Roman Empire, Holy Roman Empire, the Moors, right? Napoleon, right? The First French Roman Empire, which is part of those last 4, which is one of those 4, and England. So France and England, right? So they all ruled according to their course, right? The heads being preserved for the last, right? America, Babylon the Great. EU, Russia, right? Verse 10, and I beheld, and lo, the voice went not out of her heads, but from the midst of her body, right? Because it wasn't, right, one particular kingdom, right? It was that spirit that right, that spirit of that old serpent, right, which is Satan, right, which assists Esau, right, by giving him rule, by giving him access to technology, certain weaponry, right? It was in the midst of the eagle, meaning, right, that was that old serpent, that wicked spirit that Cain had, right, which kind of helps forward the eagle, right, which is Esau, right? So it came from the midst of her body, right? Because the spiritual demon Satan has always been in the midst of Esau, right? Gave him that dominion, right? Verse 11, and I numbered her contrary feathers, and behold, there were 8 of them, right? Right, so it says, right, the 8 contrary feathers. Verse 12, and I looked, and behold, on the right side there arose 1 feather and reigned over all the earth, right, which is Julius Caesar, right, which had a great reign, right. So this, we're talking about the 12 feathers on the right side, right, of the eagle, right, which are the 12 Caesars, right. We're going into the 12 Caesars now, right. Verse 13, and so it was that when it rained, the end of it came, and the place thereof appeared no more. So the next following stood up and reigned and had a great time, which is Augustus, right? He ruled for a long time, right? I believe he had the longest rule out of all the Caesars, because within these 12 Caesars, you had some of them were poisoned, and right, some of them were killed, right? Some committed suicide, right, which we're going to go into that, right. Verse 14, and it happened that when it rained, the end of it came also like as the first, so that it appeared no more. Then came a voice unto it and said, right, this is that, right, spiritual demon Satan, right, again, right, he's the one who's, right, pushing Esau, pushing, right, his wickedness, right, assisting him, right, on the left hand side, however the case may be, through the revelation of certain technology, right, and right, however it happened, right, that's that old serpent working in the background, right. So it says, there came a voice unto it and said, hear thou that hast borne rule over the earth so long, this I say unto thee, before thou beginnest to appear no more, there shall none after thee attain unto thy time, neither unto the half thereof. So basically, this is spiritual demon Satan, right? He could have appeared to, right, to Augustus, right before he died, because I believe he was on his deathbed at a certain point, right? Because he reigned for a very long time, right? Julius being the greatest, right, because he established, right, that Roman structure, right. Verse 18, then arose a third and reigned as the other before, and appeared no more also, right. This is talking about Tiberius, right. Verse 19, so went it with all the residue one after another, as that every one reigned, and then appeared no more, right. So one after the other, right, they appeared, they and reigned according to their time, right. Tiberius, after Tiberius, right. For example, Galba, which is the 7th Caesar, ruled for 7 months, right. Otho ruled for 3 months. He committed suicide. Galba was killed. Vespasius ruled 8 months, which was the 9th Roman Caesar. He died of old age, right, and so on and so forth, right. Verse 20, and I beheld, and lo, in process of time, the feathers that followed stood up upon the right side, that they might rule also. Some of them ruled, but within a while they appeared no more. For some of them were set up, but ruled not, right. So some of these 12 Roman Caesars were set up, but they were right, taken out of the picture, right. Verse 22, after this I looked, and behold, the 12 feathers appeared no more, nor the 2 little feathers. right? Which is the two, right, prominent Caesars, right? They're counted as the two little feathers because they were the most prominent of them, right? Which are part of the 12 feathers, essentially, right? So it says, and or Salakia, the two little feathers, because that's not part of the 12, were, right, which is Nerva and the Antoine dynasty. So it wasn't necessarily certain individuals, it was a dynasty, right? Which is, right, these are the contrary feathers coming into the picture. The 12 appeared, the 12 of Caesar's reign. Then you had other Caesars, some ruled for, right, for for within small spans of time, right, which are two little feathers. This is part of the 8 contrary feathers, right? And it says, and there was no more upon the eagle's body, but 3 heads that rested and 6 little wings, right? Which is, we're at what verse? Right? So now they're called wings, right? But that's still going into the 8 contrary feathers. So 2 of them were done away with, right? And it says, and there was no more upon the eagle's body, but 3 heads that rested and 6 little wings. Right, so 3 heads were left, 6 little wings. Which 2 of those was represented the fall of the Western Roman Empire, right? Which is Romulus Augustus. And then the other 2, or Salaki, the other 4 represented the Holy Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, right? Which goes into the Moors, which goes into Napoleon establishing the first French Empire, and England ultimately being established, which is part of those last 4 wings, contrary feathers. Right here they're called wings, right? 6 little wings, right? So then it says, then saw Salakia, 2nd Esdras 11:24. Then saw I also the 2 little feathers divided themselves from the 6, and remained under the head that was upon the right side. For the 4 continued in their place, right? So those 2 little feathers is the fall of the Western Roman Empire, right? Again, 455, 476 AD, Romulus Augustus, right? Which is, right, you can look up the history on that. We're not going to go into that, right? So now you have the 4 contrary feathers, right? Verse 25, and I beheld, and lo, the feathers that were under the wing thought to set themselves up and to have the rule, right? It's talking about, right, the Moors ruling, right? Esau losing power, right? The Holy Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, right? And even, right, when Esau came back into power, right, the first French Empire, England ultimately coming into the picture. They thought to set themselves up to rule. Jake thought he was going to rule forever, right? But it was only meant to be for a 1,000-year period, right? Verse 26, and I beheld, and lo, there was one set up, but surely it appeared no more. And the second was sooner away than the first, right? Which is the one being set up, which is one of the feathers, is Napoleon, and the first French Empire being established, right? and I beheld and lo, the sooner, verse 27, the second was sooner away than the first, right? England, right? Because they didn't keep in they didn't remain in power, right? Verse 28, and I beheld and lo, the two that remained thought also in themselves to reign, right? Or Salakia, the first two, verse 26, the one being set up was the Eastern Roman Empire, right? This, verse 26, verse 27, the second was sooner away than the first, which is the Holy Roman Empire, right? And the two that remained, right? So those are two of the four last contrary feathers. And the last two is France and England, right? Which is why it says in verse 28, and I beheld and lo, the two that remained thought also them in themselves to reign. Verse 29, and when they so thought, behold, there awaked one of the heads that were rest, namely it that was in the midst, for that was greater than the two other heads, which is America, Babylon Great, right? Because ultimately they rebelled against England, right? Defeated France, and certain fights for certain wars that they fought for territory in America, Babylon Great, right? Verse 30, and then I saw that the two other heads were joined with it, right? Which is Russia and the EU, the European Union, right? Because ultimately, right, the EU was joined with America, Babylon the Great, and Russia was joined with it in the sense that, right, it remained a country even after the fall of the even after the fall of that old Soviet spirit, right? So they were joined with America, Babylon the Great in the sense that they still reigned upon the earth. They had a great reign, right? But in this case, the EU assisted the US, America, Babylon the Great. Russia was still kind of, rejoining, recouping itself, right? And during these times, right, that old Soviet spirit is being raised up, the bear, right? Verse 31, and behold, the head was turned with them that were with it, and did eat up the two feathers under the wing that would have reigned, which is the last two feathers, last of the two contrary feathers, England and France. Right, so Esau was prospering, right? That new Rome was coming back, right? Verse 32, but his head put the whole earth in fear, and bare rule in it over all those that dwelt upon the earth with much oppression, had the governance of the world more than all the wings that had been, right? This is Esau at its height, right? Which is during the 70s, right? Which was when he ultimately started to fall, right? Esau started to be divided, the truth coming out. 1 West, Harlem, New York, 125th Street, right? Our elders and apostles of Great Millstone, right? Which have labored for decades and decades and decades to give us this truth, right? Represented that fall, that, right? That was bound to come, right? So verse 32, that represents the epitome of Esau's reign, right? Verse 33, and after this I beheld, and lo, the head that was in the midst suddenly appeared no more, like as the wings, right? Because that Soviet Union was put down, dismantled, right? The head disappeared, right? Which means, right? Russia was being reestablished, right? That Soviet spirit came back as Russia, right? Which is why it disappeared, meaning that, right? it just fell into the background, right? It fell into obscurity. Just like as the two feathers, which is why it says as the wings, here it calls it wings, right? Verse 34, but there remained the two heads, which also in like sort ruled upon the earth and over those that dwelt therein, right? So that's talking about, right, America, Babylon Great, NATO, EU, right? Verse 35, and I beheld, and lo, the head upon the right side devoured it as it that was upon the left side, because the EU is going to turn on America, Babylon Great, and destroy it with thermonuclear fire, right? Verse 36, then I heard a voice which said unto me, look before thee, and consider the thing that thou seest, right? And I beheld, and lo, as it were a roaring lion chased out of the wood, and I saw that he sent out a man's voice unto the eagle and said, right, which is Yahushai, right, the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, right? Because, right, Satan has a voice as well, right? Seducing spirits, right? Propaganda, Esau's propaganda, pop culture, social media. All you see when you look on your phone is just blasphemy, folly, lies, the wicked being proud, boasting in their pride, right? But as, right, the servants of Yahweh Shem Shai going out on highways and byways, right, you have a greater voice, which is called also a light, right, which is, right, the testimony of the servants, the prophets, which is testifies of Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, the latter day prophecies, right, righteousness, right? Salakia. Verse 38, hear thou, and I will talk with thee, and the highest shall say unto thee, right? Which is why it says in verse 37, he sent out a man's voice unto the eagle, because we're chanting down America, Babylon the Great, right? Letting the wicked know their judgment, letting 2/3 of our people know their judgment, right? Verse 38, hear thou, I will talk with thee, and the highest shall say unto thee, which is through the Rakakodash, the Holy Spirit, right? Which is the book, which is the counsel of the Lord, the holy angels, right? All of it. Verse 39, art not thou it that remainest of the four beasts, whom I made to reign in my world, that the end of their times might come through them? Right? Verse 40, and the fourth came and overcame all the beasts that were past, and had power over the world, with great fearfulness, and over the whole compass of the earth, with much wicked oppression. So long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit. Right? And this is what we're declaring to Esau. We're telling him, look, we know who you are. We know we have that anointing. Right? That eye salve. Right? And Esau knows, right? The nations know, right? The cat's out the bag, basically. That's what it's saying in verse 39. Right? Verse 41, for the earth thou hast not judged with truth. And that's exactly our message, right? Right? Verse 42, for thou hast afflicted the meek, thou hast hurt the peaceable, thou hast loved liars, and destroyed the dwellings of them that brought forth fruit, and hast cast down the walls of such as did thee no harm. Therefore is thy wrongful dealing come up unto the highest, and thy pride unto the mighty. The highest also had looked upon the proud times, and behold, they are ended, and his abominations are fulfilled. Right? Which is via going out on highways and byways, via doing the videos, the lessons, the breakdowns, right? Like it says in the book of Ezekiel, let's get that real quick. He digged through that wall, right? And he saw greater abominations and greater abominations, right? Which we're, right? This represents us also, the prophets, right? The servants of the Lord, being diligent and searching these things, right? Entering into the other man's labors, right? Dividing the word of truth rightfully, right? So let's get that in Ezekiel, right? Which is via the internet, right? And various means, right? That the Lord gave for the ministry, right? Get that real quick. Ezekiel chapter 8 and verse 7. And he brought me into the door of the court, and when I looked, behold, a hole in the wall. Then he said unto me, Son of man, dig now in the wall. When I had digged in the wall, behold, a door. Right, so this actually happened, right, as to Ezekiel back then. He saw the abominations that Israel did, but now we're seeing that through, right, that hole in the wall represents, right, the Bible, the internet, right, which lets us get insight onto the wickedness, right, and to be able to break down the wickedness that is going on planet Earth, right? Book of Malachi says that what? They spake often one unto another. We're speaking through each other through these videos, relaying the message, right? Ezekiel chapter 8 and verse 9, and he said unto me, Go in and behold the wicked abominations that they do here. So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping things, and abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about. Right, and that's all you see is via the internet, creeping things, fouls, the shame of our people. Right, all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Verse 13. Ezekiel 8 and 13, he also said unto me, Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Right. So if you dig too much in the internet, you're just gonna drive yourself crazy, right? That's what your phone's trying to do. It's trying to scare you, trying to, right, show you various images, right? Esau's playing it mind warfare, psychological warfare. Right, so you got to have your loins girded about, right? Being as that good man of the house that waits for his Lord, right? Receiving this word, right? Your job is to shut the hell up, right, and learn, and right, get this word, eat it up, right? So 2nd Esdras chapter 11 and verse 45, and there appeared no more thou eagle, and therefore appeared no more thou eagle, nor thy horrible wings, nor thy wicked feathers, nor thy malicious heads, nor thy hurtful claws, nor all thy vain body, that all the earth may be refreshed and may return, being delivered from thy violence, and that she may hope for the judgment and mercy of him that made her by Shema Mashiach Yahushai. Right? So that's pretty much it for 2nd Esdras chapter 11, right? Through the Spirit, right? Lord willing, you were edified, right? And as always, giving all honor and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kakwadash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Kwame Asha Allah, Abad Ball, Shalom. Part 2 coming soon. Shalom.